Hey everybody, welcome to this video. This is Shane Smolian from Wolf Trader Futures, and I'm going to look today at lunar cycles. Lunar cycles. So this is an exciting topic because this is something that you guys can use at home. Of course, this video is for educational purposes only, but you can use it to kind of guide you through the markets if you're kind of curious to see when this might be making turns. So you can see down here, I have my axis here, and I have I'm going to make this learning curve go all the way to the end here. So we're going from 2009 all the way to basically the present here. This data is pretty. It's like late August of 2025. So you have a lot of information here specifically for a lunar cycle. So I'm going to go over here to the composite expert, which is one of my favorite features here. This is Market Trader Titanium by Air Software, but this is really a cool feature here. You can see. So what we have here is we have the planets as they move through the different signs here. This is the sun. I'm going to actually go to the moon. So I want to look at the moon, and because the solar cycles are the annual patterns, this is the moon, or how it moves through the signs. And so what we want to point out here, first of all, is that these are the different signs down here on the bottom. So I'm going to kind of highlight these for you as we go. This is the sign of Aries. This is Taurus. This is Gemini. This is Cancer. This is Leo, this is Virgo, this is Libra, this is Scorpio, this is Sagittarius, this is Capricorn, this is Aquarius, this is Pisces, and then back to Aries here. So each of these is broken up into thirds. Okay, so this is how they break it up in astrology with the signs. They have the three different decans that they look at. So you can see here there's 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to start describing this here. So first of all, I'm going to identify the two major peaks and the two major troughs. So this starts to rise in the sign of Aries here, and it's going to move up here, and it's going to peak here right at the third decan of Taurus here. So you can see that's typically when this peaks. Then this starts to fall off. It falls down and makes a low into the first decan of Cancer, goes up in the second decan of Cancer, and then falls again into the third decan of Cancer. This goes up into Leo, makes a peak into the second decan of Leo, goes down into Virgo, first decan, makes a peak in the second decan of Virgo, falls here into the first decan of Libra, makes a peak into the second decan of Libra, and then it falls here through Libra and Scorpio, makes a little bump into the third decan of Scorpio, but then it falls down into Sagittarius and makes the ultimate low here in the third decan of Sagittarius. So the only thing you guys need to know on this graph is like, what are the signs, basically. So where is the moon? So this is going up from Sagittarius all the way into Capricorn, and it makes this peak here into right at the end of the second decan of Capricorn, and then it falls down here into Aries again. So I want to point a couple of things out here. This data is actually pretty good. What I mean by that is that it's pretty fractal in nature. I've looked at this from 1885 on the Dow, and when you cut this up, it's pretty consistent no matter when you look at it. In other words, it's pretty homogeneous, which is good. That's what you want to see with a pattern. So when we look at this, we want to talk about the primary high here. So again, the primary high here is going to be in Taurus here. So this is the first high here. Let me use a different writing pen here. This is going to be the primary high here. This is your high right here, okay? And then you're going to come down, and you're going to be going down until you have your ultimate low here. So this is the low here in Sagittarius here. This is your high over here in Taurus. And then it goes up here again to a high, a secondary high in the third decan of Capricorn. So this is going to be a high. So, and then it's going to make another low here into Aries. So the takeaways from this are that the primary high here is going to be in Taurus, which is going to be the third decan of Taurus. The secondary high here is going to be in the third decan of Capricorn. So this is where this is going to be here. Your primary low here is going to be in the third decan of Sagittarius. And then the secondary low is going to be here right near 0 degrees of Aries, which is a really nice spot, actually. That's where you would want to see a low. You would want to see it at the Aries point there. So low there, going up into the high, falling down into the Sagittarius, and then going back up here into the Capricorn. So very interesting information, very useful. I think a lot of people, it's very easy. You can look up what sign is the moon in and you can tell very quickly. So this is kind of timeless information and it doesn't really change that much. And again, this, because we have a lot of cycles here, we have a lot of data points. We have 226 of these. So this is, there's a lot of sample points here on this. So again, this is obviously educational purposes, but you can use this as a roadmap, just, and you can kind of watch the markets to see how they respond to this. It's very, very interesting for sure. So that's the market as it moves through the signs. All that it means for a sign, by the way, you might be confused about what does that mean by a sign? It just means that it's a position in space. It's a very exact coordinate system. So this is 0 degrees here, this is 180 degrees here, and this is 0 degrees, or this is 360 as it goes out here, and then it starts the cycle again. So it's actually very, very accurate. And some people feel that the signs are actually more accurate than aspects that they make with planets like the sun and the moon, because the sun and the moon are making aspects, but they're also in different signs all the time when they're making these aspects, right? So in this way, this is probably more consistent across time if you're talking about removing variables. So the next thing I want to do is, so that's the moon as it moves through the signs. The next thing I want to do is look at the moon as it passes through aspects with the sun. So this is what this is here. This is for the S&P. And so let me explain to you what this is here. So this is this is a new moon here, over here. And these are different degrees that it makes, okay? So you're going to have to study the degrees here a little bit, but it's the same for every month. So this is going to be the new moon. And this is going to be what we call 0 degrees or a conjunction. And then over here, this is, I didn't draw 180 here, but this is 180 here. And this is what we call an opposition here. And so that's what you'll see up there. So this is going to be the full moon. Okay, and then these terms here, this is a sextile. This is a 60 degree. This is a square. This is a 90 degree. This is the trine. This is 120 degrees, and then you get into 180, and then this is on the back side, 120, a square, and then a sextile, and then back to the 0 degrees. So this is typical astrology language in terms of the aspects that they like to look at. What's interesting about this is, let me just point something out. When you use the Bradley or model like that, it automatically assumes that, you know, conjunctions are good and trines are good and sextiles are good and squares are bad and oppositions are bad. Well, that's not the case. If we look here and we see the data, clearly that's not the case, right? We've seen situations here where oppositions can draw markets up. Sometimes the market's in a square, sometimes it rises in a square. It just depends. In this particular case, though, when they're working together, when they're conjunct, after that last sextile, 60 degrees coming into the 300 degrees coming into the conjunction, is the strongest phase. But that's not always the case. And so this is why we need to actually study how the markets actually behave around it. So that's really kind of a drawback of the Bradley, that they make an assumption that squares are positive or negative, and oppositions are negative, and conjunctions positive, and trines are positive, all these things. So we know that's not always the case. And also in personal charts, that's not the case either, because different people react differently to situations. Some people like to rise to a challenge, some people don't. It really depends on the chart. All right, so here we go. So this is going to be here at 0 degrees here. This is the new moon here. So we have this high here going down into the first sextile, then the square. So it makes a low right before this square here. So again, you can see here that there is a little bit of a dip into the square, but nothing too crazy. But in terms of like the lowest part of the month, we would say that this is the lowest part of the month for the sun and the moon. Okay, so right before that first square. Okay, then it starts to build into the first trine here, which is 120 degrees. And then it starts to build here. So we're at the full moon here. But what this actually shows is that it actually builds a little bit after the full moon here. So between the opposition and the trine, it's reaching a peak here somewhere around 215 degrees, somewhere around there. But just think, it's after the full moon. It's going to rise for a little bit. So as we come around here, you can see this comes down, this hits the trine, and then it starts to fall, and it falls into that last square, and right after the last square, it makes a low. So right after the last square, okay, so the last square would be the 270 degrees, it's going to start to do a quick climb here into the sextile. It actually will peak a little bit before, after the last sextile, it will peak a little bit before the new moon over here, and then it will fall down, and then it starts to cycle again, and then it starts to fall. So the new moon, it peaked a little bit before the new moon, it's falling, and then it falls more and more and more. Again, we start the cycle all over again into the first sextile. So very interesting data here. And so let's just summarize this in terms of what we're looking at here. So if we had to look at our primary high here, so this is the high here, this is the first high, this is the primary, the peak here, and then there's a secondary high here. I would put this out into here, and this is going to be right after the conjunction. This is a high here. And then I would actually put another high here, another little one after the full moon. So this is the high here. And then if you're looking at the lows here, this is going to be your primary low here. So right after the first sextile, right before the first square, this is when you're going to see that low. This is the ultimate low here. And then it kind of comes up again here. Then there's a secondary low here right after the last square here. So this is the secondary low here on the market. And so that's really the description here. I'm looking for another, it's not really another low. I guess you could say the other, not really. You got this low here, you got this low here. You know, those are the primary points there. So it makes the high, it dips, it makes the second high into here, falls, climbs past the full moon, makes this high here, falls low right after the last square, and then it rises. It peaks a little bit before the new moon, and then just kind of falls off. So the cool thing about this is like you can use these as long as you just know what phase the moon is in. You can use these to kind of get an observation of the market. You can say, are we a new moon or a full moon? What's the sign that it's in? And you can actually combine these two data points together to get a combined graph. But for all intents and purposes, just to keep it simple, you can kind of just track each of these by hand and just kind of know where we are at each point, and it just gives you a better idea of the markets. All right, guys, that's all I got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Stay safe out there, and I will talk to you soon. Peace out.